Hey everyone, it's Jack. I wanted to share with you this beautiful scene with some willows hanging over the water. This is the riverside in Norwich, which is my hometown, as an ambulance goes by. Anyway, I wanted to get on and talk to you today about what might be going on in your own life at the moment. If you've been having a hard time, there's a few things that I wanted to connect with you on in case they help. And I'm just going to get right into it. This might be a little ranty. I'm sorry if it is. But as I was driving earlier, there were some pieces that were coming to me and I thought, wow, I want to try to share this, and I'm not going to plan this video out. I'm actually going to allow it to unfold organically. But it relates to any area of your life that you have struggled with. It could be your health, it could be relationship, it could be finances, it could be your career, it could be your family, could be your community. And I just want you to think of that area right now. And if you've struggled to make progress with it, I wanted to suggest a few things in case they help. You know, sometimes we're closer than we know to actually making some progress, right? And in any area of our lives, the aim really isn't perfection. It is generally progress. And even if you can just find a way to have some small movement forward on some index, it can be really useful, right? So if you want to improve your financial life, sometimes people, it works for them to set, you know, what we used to call bags. Maybe people do BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? I'm going to go and make £100,000 or $500,000, or I'm going to increase what I earn by £500 a week. Whatever that would look like for you. It's what we would call in the personal growth world a big breakthrough. It's a big breakthrough because it completely shifts your reality, your paradigm, and the results that you're getting in your life. And by the way, a lot of the personal growth world is quite magnetized about this concept, right? Because it's kind of sexy, you know, to completely turn something around, right? To be absolutely up against the wall and then suddenly find a way, make a way, and completely transform, right? And if complete transformation is on the cards for you, wow, what an incredible opportunity. The reality is, though, that for most of us, creating real sustainable change in our lives isn't going to come from a big breakthrough moment. It's actually going to probably be less sexy, and it might come from a myriad small things that build on themselves over time, so that at the end of the process, you can look back and say, I'm in a different place, but I couldn't even tell you specifically and scientifically that it was that particular intervention or that attitude that I shifted. It's more, it's more like looking back in your life 20 years and realizing I'm a different person now. And that process of becoming is subtle, it's ongoing, and it's not necessarily easy just to pinpoint, oh yeah, it happened because of this one particular leverage point. So I'm sharing that because a lot of you, I think, have the experience that you're working pretty hard to try to change something, right? Let's say money's your thing. Maybe you've bought books, you've been to seminars, you've tried apps, you've tried lots of things, you've tried perhaps asking for promotions, changing your career, starting a side hustle, starting your own business. You might have tried lots of things, and maybe you're having the experience, I haven't really got much to show for that. But I want to get curious what if there are bits of those jigsaws that are all actually relevant for you? They just haven't yet come into clearer resolution. They haven't yet come into integration in a meaningful, grounded, embodied way in your life. And you may not know how to do that. No one around you may know how to do that for you with this particular domain of your life. That's it's part of the challenge, part of the beauty in some ways. The mystery is we don't really know how to put all these together, because you are a unique jigsaw, and the way they're going to come together at this time of your life and this season of your life, it might be different than previous seasons of your life, and it's probably going to look different than all the people around you. But if you can keep faith that there may be some way that all the things that you've tried, it's not actually in vain. Maybe it's given you pieces of the jigsaw. Maybe it's shown that you actually have a persistence over time, weeks, months, maybe even years, to want to look at something, to want to change it. And that fortitude can actually stand you in good stead. One thing you may want to do, if it's available to you, is to take some time out from your day-to-day, which that might be impossible. You might have certain responsibilities that, you've just got to take care of, your family or your job or your home or your partner. Maybe you care for someone part-time or full-time. So there'll obviously be sobering realities that may exist in your life. But if you can find some way to significantly claim some time for yourself, which could be, it's just funny. Let's just hold that thought here. Here's another story. So this is the Red Lion pub. I think there's actually 2 Red Lions. So this was the other Red Lion. This is very close to where I used to go to high school. But when we were, how should we say, enjoying the edges of the legal drinking age in England, it was the other Red Lion that was the haunt at the time, at least until the police raided it and suddenly the party had to go elsewhere. I don't know if you can see it in the background there, running all the way along here with these big trees. This is the river. It's the River Wensum in Norwich. It's really beautiful. All right, so where were we? It may be that there are these different pieces that can come together in a different way, and that what you actually need is to just give this a kind of priority and focus that maybe hasn't been possible in previous times of your life. I don't know, have you ever had the experience that you are trying to diet, and there's so many different diets out there, right? There's the paleo diet, there's the Atkins diet, there's the meat-only diet, there's the vegetarian diet. There's all sorts of diets, and maybe you've tried every one of them and said, none of these diets works for me. But if you look back at the way in which you've tried it, you perhaps haven't had enough time and resource at that season of your life when you were trying it to maybe stick with it a little bit longer and see if there's elements of it that work for you. Maybe there's one thing in that diet that really doesn't work for you, and that cheated you from getting the results. And so you've kind of dismissed it, right? So what I'm inviting you to do is, and this isn't just diet, this is any domain of your life, is to kind of sit down and piece together your journey with this area of your life from the place that you're in now, and just notice if there are any insights that actually can kind of come with you and start to be stitched together more meaningfully than perhaps you've been able to previously, or more meaningfully just because of this time of your life, where in this season perhaps you can give it a little more space, a little more priority, right? Maybe you can let go of some commitments just in this cycle and season, so that you can put more attention on this area of your life that has kind of been difficult for a while and hasn't felt amenable to traction. It's felt intractable, and you want to see if you can get some traction, and you're going to try and do that by kind of immersing yourself in this area of your life more than you have in the past, right? Maybe this area of your life has to do with self-love, and you've been trying for a long time to love yourself, and there are so many aspects to self-love, right? Some people are great at self-love because when they're tired, they give themselves permission to rest. Some people are great at self-love because they have dialed back their inner critic, so their internal world is not self-critical. Maybe it's not super self-loving, but it's not self-critical. In the absence of that, it's kind of like, oh, I get off my own bat. Some people are self-loving because they love their bodies. Some people are self-loving because they actively love their bodies. They give it so much self-care and attention. Some people are self-loving because of the way that they set up their schedule. Some people are self-loving because of how they'll invest money in themselves for things that match their values. Right? So it's sort of like any one of these domains of our life is almost an infinite journey of potential. And if you found something intractable, it might be that there are some pieces that you can bring forward into this part of your life. It's almost like if we were going to collect the evidence of this area of your life and say, okay, so the domain that you found difficult is perhaps it's relationships. And so we're going to say, okay, so what are the themes that we notice that have been true for you across different relationships? Okay, and what are the themes that we notice that perhaps have been different? Okay, so you did some therapy back in the day. Was there anything about that therapy that taught you something? Okay, what are those things? Let's get them down. Where was that therapy insufficient? Where did you feel unmet, couldn't connect with it, like it wasn't worth it? What was that about? Okay, so perhaps the thing you didn't feel that was working with that therapy was maybe you didn't feel safe in the container with a therapist, or maybe there was ways that they didn't attune to your experience, or you felt like it was too much talk and not enough somatics, or it was so somatic that you didn't really feel like you were conceptually in the same understanding as the therapist, or perhaps the therapist was too slow for you or too fast for you. But you sort of notice, you say, okay, that's kind of what happened in that territory, as best as I can understand it. And so what about if the only time that you've experienced a Jungian therapist is that particular therapist who actually, when we look at it, just wasn't a good fit for you relationally, right? Pacing was off, or you didn't really have an easy pitch and catch, as I call it, so it wasn't easy for you to pick up what they were putting down. Do you see what I mean? So you start to actually get a little bit more scientific, perhaps even diagnostic, and sometimes from that place you may realize there's something that you're willing to try in a different way, right? Or, imagine, for instance, if as a child you had the opportunity to learn to bike, but the only bike that was available to you was a bike that didn't work very well. Maybe it's a bike that never had enough air in the tires. Maybe the pedal broke the second time you tried to use the bike. Maybe it always just made a high-pitched screech and you're super sensitive to sound, and so you associate biking with this kind of uncomfortable, high-pitched sound. Everything's liable to break. I don't really get why people like cycling. All right, now that may be a very different situation. Let's say, for example, that the person who introduced you to cycling was a real cycling expert and actually really cared about your developing a love for cycling. So they sat with you through a number of bikes to help you find a bike that worked for you, and actually worked out that you needed to keep stabilizers, training wheels, on your bike for much longer than most people. And they were willing to help you figure that out. And the time that you fell off your bike, they actually noticed how traumatic that was for you, and they had the presence and the resources at the time to sit down with you and process that experience so it didn't dent your confidence and you got straight back on your bike. Now, when you hear it like that, very few of us have probably had that kind of experience across all the domains of our life, and we might have had that kind of experience in no domains of our life, right? We might never have had parenting or relational experience where someone has taken that level of interest in us, even if that person could be ourselves. Like maybe we've never given ourselves the permission to say, hey, I might be interested in cycling, or I might be interested in going to therapy, and I'm actually going to give myself permission that this first experience, or even this next experience of it, does not need to be definitive. So I'm going to take a slightly longer approach to it and say, there seems to be something in therapy. Lots of people do it. It seems to be on the rise. So whatever goodness and truth exists within therapy, for me, I want to find that out. Now, of course, you say, well, Jack, who has kind of unlimited time, money, energy to put into trying therapist after therapist to find someone that works? And the reality is, you may not. But if there is something that's important enough for you to explore, because there aren't guarantees, that's why this is hard. We don't know. Therapy might not have so much to teach you. But if we wanted to do an exhaustive treatment of therapy for you, wouldn't we want to give ourselves the permission to experiment with different types of practitioner, different modalities, different ways of working, just like that bike we're talking about, so we can find something that actually fits for you and that allows you to come into right relationship with therapy, right? Where you kind of actually get it, you get what a good experience of therapy might look like. And I'm just pulling that. You know, you might know, for instance, that as you're listening to people talk about attachment, there's something there that kind of resonates with you. And maybe it's actually going to take a while of really digging into that concept for it to fully metabolize in your life. I'm trying to make a distinction in a sense. There's sometimes things that you hear and, was it Oliver Wendell Holmes who said, the mind stretched can never return to its original dimensions, or some version of that. And that can be true, and you may have had an experience like that. But I don't think it's the norm. And what might be more true is, you hear about something. People start talking about Pilates, and then after a while you notice more people are talking about Pilates. And then you go down your gym, you notice they're doing a Pilates class, and then you give it a go, and actually your back hurts afterwards, or the instructor isn't very clear, or they don't really have rapport with you. So you're like, well, I don't think that Pilates is for me, right? I remember Tony Robbins used to give the example of a kid trying to learn to walk. If their first experience of walking, they stumble over, which actually even to get up in order to be able to stumble over is quite an achievement. And you say, oh no, this one's not a walker, right? You look at the learning environment, even if it's not the best holding environment from the parents, you look at the learning environments that a lot of children have, where they are spoken to over and over and over again in a specific form of the language, which when I studied psychology, we called it motherese. That sounds a little gender specific as I hear it now, maybe parentese, I don't know if that term exists. But it's basically the innate knowledge that lots of us possess, that when we're speaking to a newborn, we need to adjust the way in which we speak. And we do it by, googa googa, look at you, you clever boy. How did you know to do that? So what do you notice? We slow it down, we become more playful, we exaggerate it, we sing more, so it's much easier to hear the difference between different tones. And look, I'm no expert in this, I'm just giving you an example of something that's a really rich learning environment. So if you're comparing that to, you went to one Pilates class once at your gym, and that's your only experience of Pilates, you probably haven't exposed yourself to the potential transformative effect of Pilates. And you can substitute Pilates for anything, deeply understanding what your journey with finances is, or even getting to the point where you can individualize your understanding of financial knowledge for your own path. If you're always looking at people whose pattern with money is sort of like a Warren Buffett strategy, super long-term, investment-oriented, slow, steady, accumulative, but actually that's not your dominant energy, you're either going to have to learn how to cultivate that kind of energy, or you're going to have to find an approach that perhaps fits your energy pattern, which maybe is much more creative and artistic. And it's not just slow and steady wins the day. Do you kind of hear what I'm saying? I'm not trying to overwhelm you with too much nuance. I am trying to say that if there's things that enough people seem to get some value from, there might need to be some adjustments in order for you to receive value from it, or at least to explore and inquire enough to know if there's some value in it for you. Do you kind of get what I'm saying? We sometimes in the kind of integral world, we have this expression, no one's 100% wrong. No one's 100% wrong. So that means that anyone who is kind of thinking anything, doing anything, there's something in that perspective that might be valuable. Now, no one has enough time and energy to explore everyone's perspectives on everything and analyze them and inquire into them. But if there's a lot of people that are finding some kind of value from a particular thing, and you haven't connected with that value, you might at least keep an open mind that there's more that could be available from that thing. Here, I'm going to spin us round just to take a little break here, just to show you. So this is a couple of Norwich pubs. This over the side of the river is called the Mischief. This is called the Ribs of Beef. This is actually where we used to go there. They have a function room that we would use to I'd be part of like the annual run. This is people who like running enough that they'll give up time 3 days after Christmas. It was always kind of like, it was kind of good because typically overeat at Christmas, and then it was a chance to kind of start making amends. Anyway, we would go there afterwards, and I seem to remember the Mischief was part of the pub route as a teenager. Anyways, my intention in creating this video is actually to give you credit for things that you've done in your life where you have showed up, you've tried. You know, maybe you're suffering with some kind of chronic issue in a particular area of your life. Maybe it's your health. And I know something about this where it's like, you're showing up, you're trying, and it just doesn't seem to translate into an obvious effect. And you see other people who maybe it's dating and they seem to just kind of find dates, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm spending all this time on dating apps and it never materializes into a date. How is it for this person that they just seem to kind of show up and dates drop around them? Well, part of that is dropping self-comparison and really just owning the intricacies, the liabilities and the gifts of your own particular journey. And sometimes it's that, for any of us to make progress in a domain that is not, check this out by the way, this is Norwich University of the Arts. These are, I was going to say old city walls, they're probably not the city walls, these are probably old building foundations, I'm not sure. I imagine like a crypt or a church or something maybe, but I dig this architecture. So it's partly to honor that you may have been put an effort in that hasn't been amenable to an output. And I know how frustrating that can be. I know how sometimes other people can't get it, right? So if it's easy for them to get dates and it's hard for you, they're just probably not going to get it. And in fact, their strategies that they share with you may well just not actually offer much to you at all. And that can be really challenging. You know, other people seem to be able to save money, and for you it's like, wow, that's so difficult. Or other people seem to be able to make money, and you're like, how is it they just go out and make money, and every time I try, I could work just as hard, perhaps even harder, and it doesn't happen to me, right? Nearly all of us have a mixed scorecard when it comes to what we find easy and what we find hard. And I'm not talking about a success scorecard in a conventional sense, right? Because there can be certain success approaches that are amenable across different domains that society values and deems successful. You know, so you're the successful movie star that kind of parlays that into a business career, into other careers. But I'm talking about at a more sort of soulful level of being a human being that's in a body, a human being that has a spiritual life, a human being that wants to give and receive, a human being that loves and wants to be loved and wants to love themselves. Like when it comes to these perhaps more human, universal, spiritual themes in our life, it's rare that I experience that someone has kind of like a full house off the bat with that. You know, they may be lucky, right? They may find that they often have good fortune show up in their lives, but whether that means that they have an easy time in their physicality or their experience of health and money and relationships and family and self and letting go and not being too attached and owning their experience and speaking their truth, and you can go on. You know, we're all we all have a mixed scorecard in my experience, and for a lot of us we may find each and every of those things are kind of challenging. And you know what, in this life it may not be about trying to make huge and definitive progress on every one of those domains. It might be, if you've heard people talk about this language of like, what did you come to do in this lifetime? The exact metaphysics of that are above my pay grade. But if we just hold that as a frame that you come here to do some things, to learn some things, a lot of that isn't to do with conventional success. It isn't to do with what you can train your body to do. It isn't to do with whether you can make or keep money. It's to do with deeper learnings, right? Soul level learnings about loving, forgiving, being portrayed, having to speak up for yourself, feeling lost, lonely. That's the great equalizer, right? It can sometimes seem on Instagram that certain people are just having a whale of a time in their lives, and everything they turn to is kind of like successful and sun-kissed. That may not be that interesting after a while. That may not be that interesting. There are lots of people who kind of want to be able to do what they want, when they want, how they want. And if you don't have any of that freedom in your life, of course that will be really attractive. But most of us are here to do something deeper than that. And it's actually something that's going to be revealed to us, right? It's not just that we get to go around saying, oh, what do I want the purpose of my life to be? It's actually, I'm just going to turn around here. It's actually that life is going to have some things in store for us that are going to be revealed to us through the course of our life unfolding through us over time and in different seasons. So don't be too hard on yourself. Hang in there, but try to come up with a sober assessment of the things you've given like a real shot, that you've got into enough, perhaps through time enough to be like, yeah, I kind of know. I'll give you an example. I played a lot of football, soccer as a kid. I haven't played it much in my adult life, but I played football enough to kind of know it, right? I don't know all the latest thinking on training, but the essence of the sport, I kind of know it, and I think I'll always know it in some ways. But that took years. I also got to learn French pretty well as a teenager, young adult, and I don't speak it that much now, and I was definitely a lot better when I was 20, and it was kind of something that I gave a lot of attention to. But there's some way that has gone in, metabolized, that there are still fine points occasionally of French grammar that I surprise myself that I can kind of understand, right? If you've learned how to ride a bike, and physical capacities notwithstanding, you may find that you are always able to do that, right? So let's so impressed by the architecture here sometimes. Let's just honor that. That's what it is. It's kind of in there. But there'll be other things that you've flirted with, tried, haven't found the right instructor, haven't found the person that can even interpret it for you. I mean, when I first went to live in Boulder, Colorado, I would hear people talk about the word healing. And they talked about it so much that I kind of had an aversion to it, because it didn't seem to mean anything. They could take any experience, if I was going to stereotype it almost, it would be like, hey, what have you been doing today? Oh, I've been for a hike. Oh, how was it? Oh, it's so healing. Hey, what have you been doing today? Oh, I went to a meditation. Oh, how was that? Oh, it's so healing. So this thing that I'd almost literally never heard suddenly was being put over all sorts of experiences. Now, what's the kicker? Healing is really important in my life. it's now like a major amount of my attention is going on my own healing and also my own abilities to help and heal other people. So the thing that you may have found that you have a kind of aversion to, or you're like, I don't get it really. Everyone is just talking about self-love, or everyone just talks about growth, or they talk about their soul journey. And I don't really know what they got going on. So if any of that's happening, I'm just inviting you to keep an open mind. If enough people keep going on about something, there may be something about it. It may not be that it's going to have a transformational impact in your life. It might not be your thing. But it's just to keep that open mind enough. And then eventually, if you can find someone who really speaks your language, it may start to fall into place, or you may start to have some experiences that put it in place for you in your own life. Okay, this is Colgate. This is an old church. Norwich used to have, they said, a pub for every day of a week and a church for every week of the year. And a lot of those churches are still around. This here is actually Magdalen Street. Interesting. As I'm looking at a sign that says Five Bridge Street. So I think what it might be is either Magdalen Street just starts here or goes that way. But this is where a lot of the Indian restaurants are in Norwich. So I've had lots of curry nights here, or when I was part of the football soccer world here, we would have our annual dinner, curry and pints at one of the curry houses, Indian restaurants here. So we're actually just doing the loop here. You may remember earlier I mentioned the Mischief pub. That's here, the Mischief. And we're about to cross back over the river. The other thing that I'll point out is that they have a dinosaur thing that's going on at the moment. And you'll get things like this, our dinosaur friend, that is happening. This is Ayala the T-Specs. I guess that's some play on T-Rex. So that says number 17. There are a number of them throughout the city. That's part of kind of an exhibition, I think particularly aimed at kids. And they actually, for the moment, have Dippy. Dippy is short for Diplodocus. There's a famous Diplodocus dinosaur skeleton in one of the main museums in London. I think it's the Natural History Museum. And at the moment, Dippy is on tour. And right now, Dippy is residing in Norwich Cathedral. I love riverside walks. I gotta be honest. I also like lakes. Anything that has water. So, I hope this format's working for you. I know I'm cutting back and forth between a little bit of local sightseeing and how to progress the intractable domain, the domain of your life that just seems so difficult to get a handle on, you know. Sometimes we do need to have a deep acceptance, you know. I don't really know where I can go with this domain in this lifetime, right? It might be that part of the bigger journey here is some kind of acceptance that, yeah, maybe I won't have a conventional relationship. Maybe I won't be wealthy in the same way in this life. You know, because why am I saying that? There seems to me an assumption in a lot of the personal growth world that is sort of like, you deserve to be healthy, wealthy, in a great relationship, sort of free and fun and whole, right? And, you know, in some ways I have a lot of sympathy with that, because of course, to whatever extent that's available to anyone, I want that for them. And the sense that, you know, some people are gonna have way better health outcomes or wealth outcomes, that doesn't feel good to the innate egalitarian in me. But there's also some sense of like, this is a bit of an external model or idea that's kind of being imposed possibly on people's lives. Like, what's to say that this life for you is about having all those things in abundance? You know, unless that's a really true sort of heart desire that you can discern in the individuality of your own life, maybe it's a little bit of a fiction more than it is the reality of what your true soul journey and path is going to be about. Do you kind of get what I'm saying? It's almost the difference between approaching children's education rather than saying, well, we need every child here to get excellence in English, kind of ironic, English and math, and languages and art and music and design and science and history and geography. It's like, yeah, at some level it might be great if the way you teach in your school is so compelling that you can get every student have top marks in all those subjects. But what about if it's actually more true that we want each student to excel in whatever way we're going to define that, in the things that they're really here to do, the things that they are really gifted at? Like, wouldn't that be a better education system? So I don't know if there needs to be this assumption that everyone should be aiming for the same kinds of multiplicities of abundance in every area of their life. It might be more true to kind of say, what is this life about? Where is the rich learning? Where is the deep wound? What actually needs to be healed? Because I think when you really strip it away and kind of look at the transient nature of our lives in this bigger scheme of, just check this out, some people canoeing up the river. It's actually something I would like to try sometime. I don't always find it comfortable to sit down for that long. Not in an antsy way, just in a physical way. Where were we? Who was getting distracted by the beauty of nature? I wasn't. I'm just checking that you weren't. I'm right here in the content. We clearly know that. I do have a thing for these weeping willows. There we go. It's very peaceful. Yeah, who's to say that the education system is about having people excel in every domain rather than actually really individualizing and personalizing to the particular gifts, wounds, liabilities, potentials that each of us have. Now, some of us are more generalists, so actually an education system or a life path that includes learning in multiple domains might be exactly right. But some of us are specialists. You know, we don't actually want to do a shallow treatment on lots of different areas. We actually want to go really deep in maybe one or two areas. And it might be that everything that you need to learn in your life, you could learn mostly from one or two domains of your life, right? It might be that if you follow the how to heal myself enough, that actually you may learn lots of things that you could learn from being in a relationship, right? Or you could learn from making money and losing money, or making money and growing money. So I'm inviting a little bit more open inquiry about what an intractable domain of your life, how you hold that, how you relate to it, in some ways to give you the faith that it might be worth sticking at it. And it might be that there's a way that things can coalesce that actually hasn't been available. Like, even if you think about it very simplistically in an astrological sense, or a when does the universe have a slot open for something sense, if that's language that you're comfortable with. Sometimes just life isn't going to meet you in a certain place until it's a certain time. You know, it's like, when's the train leaving? And actually, if you check in with life is like, well, the train is probably going to only be ready to leave in 2026. Now, you can try what you want until that time. It might be some good preparation, but you're really not going to be able to get the full potential of this until the train is ready to leave the station. Now, what's challenging is you don't get a clear answer from life where it says, oh yeah, Feb 17, 2026. But often when it's on, you know, because things start to manifest, things start to move, a flow happens, a richer learning happens, the right people come into your life, the opportunities present themselves, right? So there's this way that sometimes life will coalesce with you when it's really on. Now, you know, it's not just all waiting and hanging out. You might have to do your part to show up, to practice. I mean, even just super simplistically, I sometimes remind myself in the areas of life that are difficult and can sometimes seem intractable for me. I might remind myself, well, you know, I put videos out for years, and if I was just going on the, you know, let life show you, let life give you feedback, life didn't really want me to make any videos because there was a sound called not a lot of sound. Crickets would probably be actually too much sound to describe this. I think that's probably a British expression, isn't it? Crickets, like where everything's so quiet that you can hear the crickets. Yeah, I put videos out for years. I was even just thinking earlier, I was like, wow, I can't even remember when I put my very first videos out, but I remember in 2014, 2015, having a pretty good discipline where I might get multiple videos out a week and do that for a number of weeks. And yeah, maybe some of them were, you know, I look back, there's a video that I made last fall where I kind of parodied some of my earlier videos. You know, they're maybe a little heady, kind of very specific, a bit sort of like, a bit out there. Some of the sort of specificities that I was inquiring into. But, you know, in other ways, they're actually pretty decent. I can watch them now and be like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But that wasn't the time that was right for a certain message to land in the world in a certain way. You know, so there is a thing called timing. There is a thing called seasonality, and in my experience at least, and I'm not an astrologer, but in my experience, it's hard to predict that stuff forwards. It's more that you know it when it's there. You might have even had this experience in dieting. You might have even had this experience in relating, right? Maybe there's a frustrated connection where it's never really been available to explore something, and then suddenly it comes into right season and the exploration is fully there and available, right? Or you may have had this, I don't know, in your business, it may be that for years and years it was just kind of like nothing was really happening, and you were trying so hard and you were perhaps having to work other jobs to kind of keep it together, and then suddenly something just starts to take off. And we can point to that as like a journey of persistence, and that may be a true perspective of it. But sometimes I think we miss that there are bigger things than us, right? There are bigger understandings, energies, potentials in the universe that we are always in some kind of relationship with. So if you've had an intractable domain, it might be that you haven't yet entered the period where it's going to be a lot easier for you. But when you do, you will be able to draw with you those potentials you've cultivated in those harder times of your life, right? So there might be a kind of iceberg, a cumulative effect that is happening, but you never get to see it because it's kind of beneath the surface. So you don't even know it's there. But one day you'll look back and notice, wow, all those years that I struggled at this, there is a through line, there is a thread, there is something in them that has helped me into this stage of life that I'm into now. So I would be super curious to know, please leave me a comment, what are the intractable domains in your life? And maybe what have you been trying that hasn't been working? I'm curious if any of you have had the experience of what I'm talking about, of something coming into season and then noticing, wow, there's a very different availability, right? Just in the same way that if you're expecting a harvest in winter, it's just not really going to happen. But if you can align it with the harvest time, something else might be available. So please leave me a comment. I would love to let you know. And I just want to kind of leave you with some encouragement. You know, we don't know where you can get to with this intractable domain, but I want to honor the one in you that has tried and perhaps has tried and fought hard without obvious gains, maybe in the past, that effort, it counts for something. Any of us that in any domain of our lives are trying to improve something, even if we can never make that improvement manifest in our own life, I still have a sense that when you go transpersonal in your life, right? So instead of just looking at it from the perspective of me and, what can I do, or what have I achieved, or what have I healed? Anytime we're trying to do anything, I think it has an impact in the collective. Because even if your life is spent striving for something you're never fully able to achieve, the fact that you've tried, the fact that you've supported people that are in those professions that are trying to help you, or the fact that you were willing to buy that book or go on that course or take that action or start that business or whatever it is, I believe that has value. And we may not societally recognize that value. We may not be able to precisely say how that's contributed to this other thing in the collective, but I'm under no illusions that it matters. No illusions. Lots of us are putting energy in evolutionary directions. The life that you are living, let's say you've spent some time trying to understand your attachment pattern. And let's say you don't get a specific understanding through that changes what happens to you in relationship. But the fact that you've inquired, the fact that you've made that effort, the fact that you are willing to live a life where you will take time, energy, and money and put into exploring something like attachment, that's just not even a life that was possible 50 years ago. Do you sort of get the flavor of that? That's how we're living in a more evolutionary context. That's kind of how we're living into the future on behalf of everyone. That those, if we look at it at a species level, there are healings and potentials that are important. And you and I could be a very, 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 very insignificant part of that, but it's still a significant part in a sense. Like, that's how we play our part in the greater orchestra of life. That's part of the inheritance that we leave. Sometimes parents may struggle their whole lives to not be poor, and maybe they die and they're still poor. But that struggle will have given something to their children or their community, where it might just make it a little or even a lot easier for the next person to pick up that gauntlet. So if we want to cultivate, better ways of being, more health, more truth, more authenticity, whichever ways we can contribute to that, big, small, obvious, unobvious, tried and failed, tried and succeeded, I think it matters in the bigger upswell of what collectively we are here to do and we are all doing. So hang in there, keep at it. Don't let it get you down. It's not all about the success. A lot of it is about the journey, and sometimes we understand that to be, it's not about the success when we have a successful journey, right? That actually it's the journey. It's not just the point that we arrive at. But I think it's equally true when it's not a quote successful journey, right? We might fail to climb Everest, so to speak, but everything that we learn by trying, striving, opening ourselves up to the possibility of learning, of failing, of having to deal with that, it's all really important stuff. All right, this is what I'm going to leave you with. If you can see in the background there, that is Norwich Cathedral. That is the second highest cathedral spire in England. It's a Norman cathedral, so it was built, I think, principally in the 1100s, and it was also the cathedral that for 7 years of my secondary schooling I would go to every morning and have assembly where we would congregate the whole school and we would sing hymns, and on my final day of school at about 3 p.m. I think on the Friday when I left high school, we all gathered there, sang our school hymn, Jerusalem. Most of us were kind of tearing up, and I have fond memories of times spent there. And so funny now that I've spent so much of my life in comparatively such a newer part of the world in America, I get to really appreciate the contrast with the sort of ancient history that exists here. So Leave me a comment, like this video if you've stayed this far. I appreciate it. I know this wasn't my most structured video. It was a little bit of a download interspersed with some nature time. Thanks for hanging in here. Please subscribe to the channel if you like my vibe. I'd love to have you with us. This is an awesome community. But I want to get your world on this topic. So leave me a comment. What's your experience? What are you struggling with? Do you pick up what I'm putting down? Does it make any sense to you? Refute it? Love it? Whatever it is, I want to know what your experience is. So leave me a comment. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.